Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Satsang. It's very nice to be here with you all. And I hope you're all doing well. Sarah, you have an invocation to read? Over to you, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So this is what I think is the invocation from this book. It is a verse from the book, but they've taken it, or I don't know if it's Robert Butler that's taken it and put it at the start like an invocation, because it's on one of the first pages. But it's also a verse from further on in the book, if that makes sense. I show my deep gratitude to him who brought about his victorious rule within my heart by maintaining self-attention without a break. There is no other way than this. Benedictions upon the glorious self that shines alone within the heart through the non-dual truth of its self-nature. And that's from Sri Guru Ramana Prasadam, verse 409. I'll read it again. I show my deep gratitude to him who brought about his victorious rule within my heart by maintaining self-attention without a break. There is no other way than this. Benedictions upon the glorious self that shines alone within the heart through the non-dual truth of its self-nature.
Thank you, Sarah. What a beautiful verse. And I was going to ask you to read it twice, so thank you for reading it twice. Am I that predictable? Oh dear, alas. That was verse, did you say it was 409? So verse 409 of Sri Guru Ramana Prasadam, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. But they've put it at the beginning of the book.
Yes. I think you're correct. I think the translator has chosen that verse, I think. And as well as it being within the text, at verse 409, he's also placed it at the front. And I'm assuming it was a verse that particularly struck the translator, and he thought it was particularly fitting to also repeat it at the front. I mean, it does, if that is understood and felt, the meaning of that verse you just read is understood and felt, deeply understood in your being, then that is the heart, the essence of the teaching there. And it's a very lovely, simple teaching, but it is very firm, isn't it? Because it says it's the only way. It's very lovely teaching. if understood, if meditated upon, it's very clear. But it's also very definitive. It's not wishy-washy. It's lovely without being gooey and wishy-washy. It's lovely, but it's also firm and definitive. It excludes other ways. It excludes other ways. But it directs you in doing and excluding other ways, wrong, so-called wrong ways. It's giving you clear, definitive advice and guidance as to what is the correct way. To know the self, Bhagavan tells us, to know the self is to be the self. And the self means you, your true nature, what you are. Not what you think you are, not what you want to be, not what you hope you are, but what you actually are. We call it the true self, but it just means true, just means it is what you are, as opposed to what you think you are, what other people tell you are, what you hope you could be, or you wish you were, or you wish you weren't. None of that is relevant to what you actually are. So this is what true self means. It just doesn't mean there's another self, which is the false self. There isn't another self that's a false self. There's just what you actually are, and that's everything. We only use the word true for true self because to differentiate from any erroneous idea or concept of self that you may have in your own mind. We say true self, but it's just what you are. So you are the self. You don't need to do anything or be anything or change anything to be the self. That's what you are. The only way to the self is through the self. The only way to know the self is to be the self. And that is what you are. So drop all ideas, all concepts of what you think you are. And what you are, which is what you've always been, which is what you are right now, is revealed. But if you are attached to an idea of what you are, then it seems you might be something else when you're not really. It's like a human being, if they think they're a frog, then they've got a misunderstanding. And they all look everywhere and they'll see evidence that they're a frog. According to their belief, they will find and pick and choose evidence to corroborate their pre-existing belief. If you let go of all ideas of what you are, if you think you're a frog, you think you're this, you think you're that, let go of all the ideas. If you think you're a human being in terms of, we're moving away from the analogy now. being a frog or thinking you're a frog. But back to the reality, you're the self. If you lose the idea that you're a human being or you're anything else, then what you are, which has always been known, is revealed as known and as having always been known. The self knows itself by being what it is. Knowing itself is an inherent quality of it, but it's not knowledge in the mind. It's just being. Non-conceptual, non-verbal being. So in the same way, if a human being thinks they're a frog, that's a misunderstanding, right? The same way, if you're the self and you think you're a human being, that's the misunderstanding. Do you see the analogy? So we might think it was silly that a human being thinks they're a frog. Ha 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 ha. How silly. How sad. Come on, you gotta laugh at my laugh a little bit. I made a good attempt there at humor. Ha 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 ha. He thinks he's a frog. Ho 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 ho. Or you might pity them. Oh my gosh. He or she really thinks that he or she, a human, is a frog. That's not true. What a shame. How sad. How funny. How ironic. And how sad. So similarly, coming back to the reality, you are the self, but you think you're a person. How funny. How sad. How tragic. But actually, you always know what you are. This knowledge can never be obstructed. Self-knowledge, what you are, can never be obstructed. It can be covered over, it seems, by ignorance. But in silence, it mysteriously reveals itself as having always been present. Self-knowledge, knowledge of what you are. Knowledge of what you are is the same as the self, same as your own being. It reveals itself in silence, non-verbally. And it reveals itself as having always been known. What do you have to do to be the self? Nothing. What do you do to convince yourself you're a human being or a frog? Something. So if you stop doing the something, then the inherent knowingness of what you are is that. The irony is that to know that you're a human being, or for ignorance to be present, to think you're a body mind, you first need to be. You first need to be, which is self-knowledge, before you can conceive or think that you are this or that limited thing. whether you think you're a man or a woman or this or a frog or whatever it is, any limited thing you think you are. In order to think the limited thing, you first have to be. So the irony is you're using your own beingness to identify with limitation. This is why it said that ignorance itself depends on self-knowledge, the self. Self-knowledge is the self. You let go of ignorance, it's just being. In that being, there is knowing. That knowing, again, is not in the mind. It's an inner knowing. That does not depend on the body or mind. Imagine if self-realization depended on the body and the mind, which is what I think many, many people think. If self-knowledge depended on the body and the mind, then you could say, oh, he is self-realized. Oh, she is self-realized. Yeah. Oh, he is deeply realized. She is less realized, etc., etc. Yeah. But this is self-knowledge is not related to the body mind. Imagine if it was. That means if somebody hits you hard enough on the head, you can lose your liberation. It means if you've got dementia, you can lose your liberation. It means liberation ends when the body dies. It's pretty finite. This is not infinite at all. How can liberation depend on the body-mind, which itself is temporary appearance? Nothing to do with what you really are, in essence, in truth. There is no, oh, this person is liberated, that person is not liberated. That way of thinking is ignorance, because you believe that there are people, and there are not. There are no actual separate people, or people at all, actually. Not really. The lower teaching, we say there are no separate people, right? It gives people a glimmer of hope that they can cling on to their individuality, right? This is what you normally hear. But actually, you go deeper, they're not there are no separate people, there are no people. Remember, that's the difference between interdependence and non-duality. Interdependence says we are a part of a greater whole. We're all connected, like a bunch of people across the globe holding hands, forming one really long human chain. We are part of a greater whole. We're all connected. It's a beautiful teaching. But even this is not the truth. It's closer to the truth. But actually, Bhagavan has told us that even this is part of ignorance. This is still individuality. It's less individualistic, but it's still believing you're a body-mind entity. Just your body-mind part of something bigger. Non-dual realization is beyond all of this stuff. And you know this already. The verse that Sarah read is just to allow us to remain in what we know. And that's the only way. when Bhagavan says that is the only way. By the way, I know that verse was written by Murugan. But Muruganara is Bhagavan, remember. So when Bhagavan says, this way is the only way, don't forget he is showing us clearly the way to liberation. And in doing so, he's implying what is not the way. He's telling us what is not the way. This is a beautiful, compassionate, wonderful teaching. Go the way of your own heart, your own inner knowing, not the way of the world. The world here means the ideas that you've been conditioned to believe, the limiting ideas that limit you or appear to limit you, seem to limit you. Nothing limits you, okay? But effectively they limit you because you believe it. There's the story of the person who was going trekking with their horse and they had to stop overnight somewhere. They realized they hadn't got any rope to tie up their horse. So the owner was afraid that if he just left his horse and went to sleep, the horse would just run away. So what he did, it was night time. He took the horse up to a post where he would normally tie the horse up, and he pretended he didn't have a rope to tie up the horse. He just pretended to tie up the horse and do the knots and everything in front of the horse so the horse could see. And then he went to sleep. And the horse just stood there all night because the horse thought that he had been tied up. You see? And this is like us. This is how ignorance works. The horse was free. But because the horse believed they were bound, tied up, in bondage. This is what bondage means. Being tied up. Being bound. Ignorance. Limitation. They believed that they were bound. They believed they were limited. It limited them practically. So in this way, our beliefs limit us. They never really limit us, but they effectively or practically limit us. Same way as the owner of the horse limited the horse, tricked the horse. This is how ignorance works. It appears to be all powerful, has zero power. You've just got to stop believing the mind. It is the mind that says you are limited. So don't believe the words of the mind. That's why don't go the way of the world. This is what I mean by that this time. Listen to Bhagavan's words. If you have to listen to words, listen to Bhagavan's words. His words are like the antidote to the limiting conditioning. And even better than listening to Bhagavan's words, and this will happen if you listen to Bhagavan's words, is you let go of all these words and come to yourself, which is the true listening to Bhagavan. That's his deeper. This is why I said the deeper teaching is in silence. You can listen to his words, and then you can even throw away his words and come to him, the true teacher. Sarah, would you be able to read that verse again for us, please?
Sure. I was hoping you might ask. I show my deep gratitude to him who brought about his victorious rule within my heart by maintaining self-attention without a break. There is no other way than this. Benedictions upon the glorious self that shines alone within the heart through the non-dual truth of its self-nature.
Thank you, Sarah. Remain, self-attention is the way. This means, what does that mean? It means to remain with yourself, be attentive to yourself, to be with your inner knowing, that I am. And praise to the self. The self is the non-dual truth. That means what you are is the non-dual truth. Self-attention means don't pay attention to the ways of the world, the mind. Everything else is mind. Maya is mind. Mind is Maya. Ignorance is Maya. Ignorance is the mind. Objects. This is all ego. Your own inner knowing, your own inner spiritual feeling, deeper than the mind, unrelated to actually, you might feel it's part of the body. It's actually deeper than the body mind. It's your own inner being, your own inner knowing. This is the self. It's actually just your own existence. Just to be with that is the only way. Who else are you going to trust but yourself? Who can tell you what you are? You'll know what you are. Only you know. Nothing else outside of you can prove to you or show you what you are. This inner knowing only comes from yourself. So let go of everything else. Let go of all the worldly knowledge you've accumulated, which includes, I'm afraid to say, all the spiritual knowledge you have accumulated too, which is just worldly knowledge. It's just a subcategory of worldly knowledge. And come home to your own intuitive knowing, which is unchanging, never changes. It's just your own being shining forth. And in that being, to put it into words, it's not in words, but to put it into words, in your own being, you know you are vast, you are timeless, you're eternal, you're unchanging, you're infinite, you're holy, you're divine. You're beyond. And you are totally full, fulfilled, filled and full and filled. fulfilled, fulfilled. You're fully filled, filled up to the brim. You're full to the brim. Before the body was here, you were there. When the body ceases, you will be there. Before the world, before the universe, you are. This knowledge you have is not in words. I'm putting it into words. Hearing it in words can be powerful because it can just remind you of your own knowledge. The idea is not to believe what I'm saying, but to listen to what I'm saying and let that somehow strike a chord with your own inner knowing. Remind you of what you already know. Your own inner knowledge, your own inner knowing is effortless. It's just inherent in what you are. So when you start believing the limitations, which is thought, that problems arise. So this knowledge resides in the heart of each and every one of us. But as long as you think that you're a person, then that will distort your knowledge. It will still be there, but practically speaking, it will be distorted. Remember, I said practically distorted. Reality is never distorted, but we can say practically it's distorted.